Solarpreneurs. We are here with an exciting episode. We've got someone that has been a huge supporter of the podcast and someone that I would recently say I've owed some of the recent success I've had to a lot of the contributions they've made in the solar industry. So I'm excited to have the one, the only Shadi Barhoumi here on the podcast. He is CEO and founder of Solarscout, which is actually one of our sponsors. So thanks for coming on with us today, Shadi.
Yeah, and thanks for such an awesome podcast. Many people have found us through your podcast, and you're doing a wonderful thing as well in the solar industry, Taylor.
Yeah, no, trying to contribute where we can. So, yeah, and we've been working together. I think since I don't know 3-4 months. I think now that we've been kind of partnered, and you've been supporting the podcast. And it's funny, you actually came to my event back in I think it was in April. I've actually got the poster hanging up here on my wall.
Hmm.
And it's funny because when I first met you, I was just like, this must be some like new rookie sales rep. I don't know what he's doing here. And then you come
That's
and
funny.
start talking all this data. And I will admit, I was a little like skeptical. I'm like, is this just some, I don't know, lead provider, someone doing some weird software? And then the more I started hearing about it and heard other people starting to use it, I'm like, wow, this is actually incredible what they're doing. So yeah, and we've done some marketing in the podcast, but maybe for those that aren't as familiar, do you want to give just like a quick explanation on what Solar Scout is and what it helps people do?
Sure. Yeah. So Solar Scout is a way to um, take your door-to-door efforts or your virtual solar sales efforts and 2 to 10x, depending on your input, 2 to 10x your results. So if you were knocking doors and generating one appointment per day, knocking 100 doors, now you could knock something more like 40 doors a day and get 4 to 5 appointments. And obviously, to produce different results like that, you have to do something differently. So we show you the different doors to knock to do that. And we'll get into the actual data points behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's pretty mind blowing all the different data points you have once you start using the app. But yeah, I guess before that, I want to hear just I've actually never even heard this myself, so I'm excited to ask you some of these questions. But for you, Shadi, like, what's your background? How did you guys end up creating Solar Scout? I'm just curious how it came about, why you decided like the solar industry. So yeah, let's hear like your background and where this thing came
Sure.
about.
My background is in computer science, actually. So I grew up in the Bay Area here in California. I'm in San Francisco right now, and studied at Stanford, did computer science there, worked at a bunch of tech companies in Silicon Valley. I was in crypto, actually, doing some crypto stuff in 2022. And then as crypto started crashing, right, at the end of 2022, many of your people know crypto, crypto was kind of getting regulated almost out of existence. But the IRA was passed. And then, there were a lot of tailwinds for the solar industry. And so I noticed that people were doing great in solar. Solar companies were very optimistic. So I thought, I'd love to learn, how do people actually sell solar? Do they really make 5 to 10 grand per deal in commission? And if so, how do they find these homeowners? Are there any kinds of ways to actually find them more efficiently?
How did you hear that solar reps were making that much and buy solar?
It,
Did you just hear it like, I don't
it
know,
was so random.
through
It
the
was just,
grapevine or
yeah.
yeah.
So basically, just a friend of mine, his his friend's brother. So this guy, he went to MIT and he's starting a tech company, and then his friend went to Harvard and was like, struggling with his startup, trying to make his startup work, right? So this Harvard guy from Utah, actually, um, it turns out that to make his startup work and to fund it, he would go and knock doors with his brother in Texas, who was selling
Hmm.
solar for Lumio. And
Uh,
so so then he would like fly out there and then try to make like 10 grand in a couple of weeks, um, and then go back and keep working on his startup. And so I randomly got introduced to that guy's brother in North Texas. And then he was like, yeah, sure, just fly yourself out here and we'll put you on the doors. And so I went through that experience for about 2 weeks of like knocking doors and just getting the basic training. And that was
uh,
the beginning of actually seeing, okay, I mean, basically what happened is I flew out there. The guy picked me up from the airport. He bought me a Chipotle and talked about our lives. And then he was like, well, you stay in this empty house that we used for the summer for this blitz. And it was actually October. So it was like late in the year.
Yeah.
And he said, tomorrow you're going to be on the door. So I went on the doors the next day, pretty much without any training. And I really had my butt handed to me. So basically, we were knocking in this little neighborhood in Texas, in
Yeah.
McKinney, Texas. And they were
Mm,
like, we're going to throw you, like, we're going to call the cops on you. Are you like, you're the eighth solar guy who's come here? And I actually tracked it on a clipboard. Like, I was like, oh, I'm going to be organized about this. Nobody, I didn't set a single appointment except for one nice couple from Arkansas that had moved in like 3 months earlier. And they're like, oh, yeah, like the energy bills were actually really high. And we're from Arkansas. And like, oh, coming down on Saturday. And so that was the only appointment I set. And I was like, wow, I could be a lot more efficient with this. And there are other things that went into it too.
yeah. Okay. Did that appointment end up closing? Did you get your first sale out there?
I don't know. I was a little disorganized. Like the manager, he didn't really get back to me on whether they showed or not, the closer. So I don't know whether they closed or not, actually. But I didn't hear about it later. But I mean, I spent most of that week, after that one day, I spent most of that week basically following around other guys in their cars, right? Just like sitting with them and seeing how they did it. And the
Yeah.
interesting struggle that I saw was like, um, these guys would be looking for a particular kind of utility company in the North Texas market. They were like, I'm looking for these
Yeah.
Encore homes, but then they would
Yeah.
drive out to the outskirts and end up in electric co-op territory with bad buyback programs. And I was like, well, do you
Mm,
guys have a map? And we were like, no, we just kind of drive out and we look at the mailbox, or sorry, we look at the meter on the side of the house. Like we walk up into their to the side of their house to see if this actual neighborhood is serviced by Encore or some electric co-op. And then we decide, okay, should we knock this neighborhood? And they would spend like an hour to an hour and a half a day, like driving out, oftentimes to the wrong territory. And then they call their manager and be like, this area is not Encore. And they'd send them another Google Maps pin and they try again. And it turns out like the very first thing we built was a way to find those homes that were with the
mm,
Encore utility company. And that
mm.
actually turned out to be our first step, right? And people were like, wow, this is crazy. This has solved a huge problem for us.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah, that makes more sense now. Yeah, you picked a tough market. I've done a few like blitzes out in Texas, and
Yeah.
yeah, even me doing this 8 years, I had just about the same experience you did. So I thought
Okay.
Texas was tough, and yeah, it is definitely challenging dealing with all those different utilities. But no, that's cool. And so sounds like right after that first week or whatever knocking, that's did you already kind of have the idea before you went out there? Or just like as you were out there that week, that's when you started thinking about, I wonder if it'd be useful to like have more data as you're knocking doors.
Yeah,
When did it
I had
actually?
no idea whatsoever. I didn't know anything about solar. I wasn't thinking about starting a company. I was just like, let's just explore this thing. Let me learn about this particular niche, right?
Yeah,
Solar sales. So
yeah,
went out there and then realized how much opportunity there was. Like these guys really did make an average of like, I calculated they're like $500 an hour, right? For the guys who are actually closing deals and stuff. I was like, wow,
yeah,
well, if we can save an hour and a half of your time, that might be worth a lot.
yeah. No kidding. Well, and it's interesting hearing your just way going about it because most people doing door to door, they don't come with like kind of that tech computer background like you do. And so I think that's useful just probably for everyone that's in door to door in general to um, have that at least a little bit that type of mindset. Because especially new guys coming in, they don't like track their numbers, they don't keep any data, they don't like, yeah, very few reps even that I see even know how much they're making per hour. And
Mhm.
it's like it's funny how many people like burn out or like, oh, this sucks, I'm barely making any money, but they don't even calculate that simple math to know, okay, I closed the deal. Yeah, I wasn't making money necessarily for like the 20 hours before that, but it's like, yeah, if you add up what you actually make for your hourly rate, I think most solar guys, yeah, it's probably $500, thousand, sometimes $1,000, even more. So yeah, no, interesting and probably valuable for people to hear that. But that's a cool story, man. So did you start testing it with the team, just the guys you were out with? Did you like kind of come up with something, send it to them to test it, or where did it go from there? How did you guys start the whole software from there?
Yeah, basically, I mean, we built that feature and then we showed it to, I think I built like a very small prototype of it in like maybe a week or so. I was still like there living in their like Blitz house. And then I put that thing together on my computer and then showed it to them. They're like, yeah, wow, this actually is going to be huge. because they had been looking for all kinds of like workaround ways to figure out which homes were with which utility company. But once we
Yeah.
built that, it was very clear that that was helpful to them. And then they invited me to go and talk to the manager of this guy that I was kind of knocking for. And then he had these other ideas. He was like, well, okay, this is really cool. And I also want to know everybody who has solar already and all of their names and when they got solar. Like that would be super useful. And I also want to know which areas have electric heating and which areas have gas heating. Because the electric heating, they actually have high bills in the winter, right? And then we just kept hearing more and more stuff about different things, that different data points people could have access to that would give them an advantage. And then everybody kind of has these in their minds. And then just as we went, we started putting more and more into the app.
Yeah. Yeah. Incredible. So, yeah, I guess, do you want to tell people what are the main, I know you have like a ton of crazy data points now, but what would you say are like the main data points that every user is going to have access to if they decide to use Solar Scout? What are like the main data points that you've seen are most helpful and that pretty much everyone is using that uses Solar Scout?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's the big three approaches, right? The first one we'll talk about is new move-ins. So these are people who have been in the home from anywhere from they just moved in to they've been in the home for 12 months. And then you can decide how to target. You can target the people who just moved in from like 0 to 6 months, right? And so they haven't been knocked before. They may be new to the area, new to the weather system. That makes them a lot more open to setting an appointment, just like that couple from Arkansas that I knocked. And in fact, that's like a kind of niche within the new move-ins that we highlight. So there are new move-ins that moved in from out of state, and we'll show you that in the app. And if they moved in from out of state, they're quite likely to be more interested and more curious and more open to like, let's say I moved from Arkansas to Florida. You'd say, hey, well, here in Florida, do you wonder why everyone has the panels on their roof? It'd be like, are you wondering why the rates are so high? You have that natural curiosity because they're new to the area.
Yeah,
So there's that
that's good.
particular approach with new move-ins and
Cool.
out-of-state move-ins. There's also first-time homeowners. So people, we can show you that they moved from an apartment previously, which means
Yeah.
that they've literally never been knocked for solar before, right? It's not like, oh, this is my fifth house in Florida and I hate solar. Like you're not going to run into that. They're like, oh, I was in an apartment. Yeah, the rates are a lot higher and the usage is much more if I'm in a house now.
Yeah.
So that's the new move-ins
That's good.
approach.
Yeah,
Um,
that's good. Yeah, and then I guess just to interject real quick there, because I think most solar guys know that you can get new move-ins just off Zillow, Redfin. You can go see all that data, and even before I met you, Shadi, I was like going and I was having a virtual assistant go make spreadsheets of all the new move-ins, driving all over the place. So that's kind of like the way, even if you're not using Solar Scout or maybe you're not going to, you can still do it that way. And I had a lot of success doing it that way. But the data you just talked about, like knowing those extra things, maybe the ones from out of state, the first time buyers, that's just like, it's like doing Zillow on steroids because now you have all these different people you can target. And yeah, it's just like you talked about from the beginning, being even more efficient with your time and adding that extra layer. So that's where I think it's, really useful to use a tool like Solar Scout.
Right.
Um,
You can also
but
see some other things is like you can see their name and their email and stuff like that, or their phone number. You can call them, right, if they're not at the door. I noticed the door-to-door guys actually, now that the phone number is available in Solar Scout, they'll say, hey, like, I knocked this door and they didn't open, so I called them and I set the appointment on the phone, which is actually really cool for someone in a door-to-door context to be able to do.
mm, that's good.
And then, yeah, and it's really good to see that people had been previously like, looking for ways to access these people, because that shows that, hey, it works, right? Um,
Yeah.
so we didn't invent that. We just made it, you can systematize it across your team. But I think probably one of the more interesting data points is the solar permits, right?
Yeah.
And so solar permits are basically, when you apply to go solar, you submit a permit to the city. There's that whole history of everybody that's gone solar or tried to go solar, that we're able to pull. And what we do is we show it to you in the map and you can highlight it in different ways. And so you can highlight those people whose permits are marked by the city as expired. Those ones actually never got installed. So you can see, hey, for example, like SunPower pulled this permit in 2021 for an 8 kilowatt system on this home, and I can see that the homeowner bought their house in 2020, so it's the same homeowner, and the solar is not on the roof. And so we use up-to-date aerial imagery where you can look at the roof and you can say, hey, like I'm looking at an up-to-date image of your home. You don't have solar on your roof, but I see that you tried to go solar with SunPower in 2021. What happened? And then oftentimes, those will convert to appointments. And when they convert to appointments, those appointments often close because this person knows exactly what they're getting into. They've been through the whole solar process before. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the
So good.
expired solar permits approach.
Yeah, so good, so good. And yeah, I will say having that up-to-date imagery, that's especially in a market where I'm in California, where so many people have solar
Mm.
and so many people got solar recently with this whole NEM2 to NEM3 push. You look at basically any other map, and there's so many people that just don't have the solar that's updated on the map. So even that alone, um, yeah, I wish I could count up all this time it saved because, like,
Oh, cool. Yeah,
just like
that's
going
great.
door to door and seeing who has it. So that thing is a game changer alone. But yeah, and something I know you guys have taken some heat for, Shadi, is you go on these Facebook groups and everything. I know people like to talk trash and everything. These girls,
Yeah.
but there's always the complaints about, oh, these permit poachers, this guy's permit poaching, and then you see, I know you guys, a lot of times are posting like your updates, new features, and stuff like that on Solarscout across these groups, and there's always like the trolls on there saying, "Oh, these guys are just like encouraging the permit poachers and stuff like that." So I know you've addressed that on the groups, but what do you say to those people? Like, how is it, useful and maybe not like encouraging permit poaching, but how what would you say
Yeah,
you're doing to avoid that?
totally. That's a great question. So, yes, anytime you post anything in a Facebook group that says, in a solar Facebook group that says the word permit in it, all the comments are about permit poaching, which is hilarious. But, the thing I
Yeah,
just described, an expired permit from 2021 that never got installed, it's like seeing somebody who wanted to go solar. That permit is gone. Like you can't do anything with it. It's never going to be reactivated again. You literally cannot install on it. And so
yeah,
that was an abandoned job. And we always have a delay of a certain number of months, where from the time we pull the data to the time we show it on the app, there's a delay which should give jobs that are like going to be installed time to get installed. And so it's not
yeah,
you can't go on to Solarscout thinking it's the ultimate tool for seeing real-time permits, because we don't show real-time permits. We'll show
mm,
kind of older permits that have either not been installed or just permits that got installed a couple months ago, so you can go and knock the neighbors. That's another thing you can do with permits. So the overall
yeah,
approach, or the overall response to people who say, oh, if you're looking at solar permit data, you have to be permit poaching. I would say that's incorrect, right? You can look at the expired permit data, right? And then 10% of the volume in these markets, every 10% of the solar permit volume in these markets are permits pulled on top of expired permits. So like people have previously tried to go solar and then now are going solar finally, for real this time. 10% of the, let's say, the permits in San Diego every month are actually pulled on top of expired permits. So that's kind of proof that people who previously pulled a permit are going to go solar again at some point. But then there's that approach. There's knocking the neighbors of these recent permits. And so you can talk to them and be like, hey, you got your solar installed a month ago. You can talk to the neighbor and say, hey, Deborah got her solar installed a month ago. You saw the trucks in the area. That kind of keeping up with the Jones effect is very strong for appointment setting.
mm,
And then the last thing,
good,
there are two more things you can do with permits, right? We have a filter that'll show you, hey, these are the permits from now bankrupt installers. And so people
mm,
who do service directly want to reach out to those people. And because those systems
mm,
are installed, but now the company's out of business, and people who do service say, yeah, I literally want to know where the SunPower permits are. And I want to know where the Titan permits are, because I want to go help those homeowners with any issues they have. Yeah, they might not make a ton of money doing the service, but down the line, they will be the kind of solar hero that's trusted. And then when it's time to make referrals or do add ons, they're going to want to work with this person who reached out to me and said, hey, Titan's out of business. I know Titan installed your system, but we're here to help if you need anything. So that's
mm.
that's
Yeah,
the
that's
third
good.
way to use permits.
Yeah,
Um,
that's good.
there's so many, yeah. There's so many like great, legitimate, helpful ways to use it. That's my response.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and this could be probably a 10-hour podcast if we wanted to on all the different ways
Yeah.
and ways to target. And I know you guys are doing trainings weekly and stuff like that. But how do you, so someone that has all this data, because I'll say that's one thing for me is sometimes there's like so many different data points, You go on
Mm,
Solarscout and you guys are always adding new points of data and all that.
mhm,
That I will say one thing for me, sometimes it can be almost overwhelming seeing all this different
mhm,
data. And it's like, oh, what should I target today?
mhm,
And it's
mhm,
almost paralysis by analysis sometimes for me because
mhm,
I'm like, oh, maybe I'll try this today, or what, I don't know, maybe I'll just go back to this strategy. So, what are
mm.
you seeing, and maybe what do you suggest for people that are using that, or even if they're not using the app? Like, what do you think is most effective, or what have you seen? Is it people switching off on these strategies, or how do you not get overwhelmed by all this data and just like get consistent results and not get overwhelmed? What would you say?
Yeah, that's a great question. The people who I see doing the best are always the ones who, of course, are the most consistent and who don't give up. So they pick a particular strategy, let's say in their first month, and they do just that strategy. Oftentimes, people will start with a new move-in strategy because um, there's the data is plentiful, and then we also have scripts that we provide, like scripts and slicks that we provide our users that have been proven out by our sales trainer who's on staff who actually goes out and uses this information and then writes these scripts for us. His name is Earl. Um,
Yeah, I
and
know
so
Earl. Yeah.
basically, we give them the script, we show them how to filter it down in the app, and they go out every day and they knock 20 to 40 of these new move-ins, and they don't get distracted by anything else, like anyone with their garage open or their dogs out, or it looks like a good house that's getting blasted by sun or whatever. Just don't do that. Just knock the new move-ins. And the reason that that works is because um, you start to hear the same set of objections and the same set of stories and the same set of concerns and the same set of buying questions and stuff like that. And then you master talking to one particular kind of homeowner with one particular set of concerns. And then it's like, you can kind of enter this flow state. Not like you're knocking one door and they're like, oh, my brother hates solar. And the other one's like, oh, like try to go solar, but it didn't work. You're just honing in on one particular approach with one kind of prospect. Those people really do the best. They get one and they stick with it. Not giving up immediately as well is like a kind of an underrated like skill. Like I notice sometimes if maybe it's just a solar thing, but like if people have issues like getting started, they're like, oh, I knocked 5 doors and they were all not home. Sometimes they'll give up immediately, and it's kind of like that meme of like the guy who's like digging for gold and like he gives
Yeah.
up right before he hits the vein of like diamonds or whatever or gold. Like oftentimes we'll say like the numbers will work out in your favor. You can knock 10 doors in a row and they all won't open, but the latter 10 you'll get like 3 4 appointments out of it. We see that happen all the time, so it's about trusting the process as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And that I remember talking to Earl about that. Earl's actually a good friend of mine. Ran a team with him out here in San Diego. But yeah, I was talking to him the other week and he was telling me a lot of the same stuff. And I didn't even think of that because for me, it's always been like, okay, I'll knock the new move ins. But yeah, if I see like garages open or people around it, then I'm always going to stop and talk to them just because it's like sometimes with the new move ins, you're driving 5-10 minutes to get to one. And then if they're not there, you felt like it's time wasted and all that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
But what's really cool too, and maybe you were going to get into this, but Earl was just mentioning how also you can target within that, like different demographics, different age groups. So not only new move-ins, but you can go look at maybe they're older, retired people, and you can make separate lists of those. Because I'm like, but Earl, what if I'm driving all over the place, wasting my time midday going to these new move-ins? No one's going to be home. And he's like, well, yeah, do new move ins, but set an extra layer to people that are like retired
mm-hmm,
and are more likely to be there. So I thought that was a good idea too, just like targeting that because he was mentioning like even more likely is people that are retired and they move from out of state. That those are like some of the most likely people to go solar because they're probably not going to move again if they're older. They just moved here from out of state. That's probably their home until they're going to the grave, right? So I thought that was good. But yeah, no, it's good strategies. But anything else you're seeing, or I guess anything you want to add to that, or any other
yeah,
main targeting
totally.
strategies on top of that?
Sure, yeah. So we talked about the move-ins, we talked about the permits. I think that one really underutilized strategy actually with permits is filtering down to find all the people with older systems, and then you can find people with like at least 10-year-old systems, and you can filter that out of the app, and then you can see, hey, you have a 10-year-old system, you have a 10-year-old system. These people tend to need add-ons, and it's kind of an easy sale to sell an add-on system to somebody who already has solar but just needs more. And I'd love to see more reps capitalizing on that. It can be tricky in California if NEM3 prevents adding on too many panels before you get kicked into a less favorable net metering regime. But in all the
Mhm.
other markets, like I'd love to see people doubling down on the people who need add-ons, because that's one of those things where it wasn't possible previously to, like, in 5 seconds be like, I want to see everybody in this town in Massachusetts that has had solar for at least 10 years, but now you can do that. And so that's one thing. The other thing is, which I think is actually makes a lot of sense, and Earl's been proving it out. It's a newer feature, is like knocking people who have gone online and filled out solar ads, right? So we have some layer called ad respondents, and it's people who have gone online and filled out an ad and been like, yeah, my name's George, my monthly bill is $500, I'm with PG&E, and I want solar, I have good credit. So they go online, respond to ads, and we buy that data from the third-party providers, load it into the app with the up-to-date imagery, and then a door knocker can spend their day knocking people who literally, like, last year or 6 months ago said, yeah, I'm interested in solar. And it's a totally different world and different set of results from, like, I'm knocking everything, I'm just grinding out here, I'm knocking the renters, I'm knocking the people who hate solar. Like, you're just knocking people who want solar. That's kind of that's the third of the big three approaches.
Yeah. Yeah, like it. So yeah, how many, because I know you guys are launching Solarscout all over the country here in the US. So what would you say, what's like your most successful market? Do you have a market where people are seeing more results than others, or where you got more users, or is it kind
Oh,
of
that's a
spread
great
across the
question.
board pretty good? Yeah.
Oh, that's such a good question. Yeah. Just this is all anecdotal evidence, right? But I noticed that we have teams, first of all, of course, in California that are doing super well. Especially, we have teams who are selling virtually in California that are doing really well as well. So people are doing digital door knocking or just calling, where they'll call these expired permits and be like, they'll be very direct. They'll be like, hey, like, you tried to go solar with Infinity in 2021, like, didn't work out, right? Did you still want solar? They literally say that on the phone, and like they were just on our mastermind group last Friday, and that was doing super well. So we noticed that the California market with the expired permits is doing well, and then in Massachusetts, I noticed people are doing super well too, um,
Mhm.
and they use the ad respondents and the move-ins, and I think Massachusetts is a great market for solar as part of it. Um, but
Mhm.
then apart from that, people with the more niche their approach, the better. That's what I see. So if there are people in Texas who are like, I'm just targeting people who have high bills in the winter, who are Hispanic, right? And then you can kind of filter that down into the app. When I hear some, like, kind of a weird approach like that, I'm like, this guy is definitely making money, because like that's this term, the riches are in the niches. Like, that's what the
Yeah.
kind of the app is all about. There are people who target,
Sure.
like, just Brazilians, right, or just Africans, right? Like,
Oh,
and then there are like layers that will kind of sort out these people, and then you know like there's someone from, like, sub-Saharan Africa. He, like, sells to people with similar last names to him, and there's like a filter in the app for that, and he does great, right? Those are
oh,
his people. So all
oh.
kinds of really interesting approaches.
Yeah. That's incredible. Yeah, I didn't. That's funny. We have a lot of, obviously here in California, it's a lot of Mexicans, a lot of Spanish speakers.
Let
Yeah.
me ask you, Taylor, what is your niche? I know you have a niche, actually. I don't know if you'll say it on the podcast.
um, well, I don't know. It's condos, townhomes, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, and then I don't know. Lately, it has been a lot of seniors. Maybe not necessarily on purpose, but um, for whatever reason, I'm coming across a lot of like senior families, and um, yeah, been targeting them a little bit. Yeah, I probably can niche it down even more, but I don't know what would you
Yeah.
say?
No, that's a good one.
What's
No,
your
I
idea?
mean, from what I heard of your approach, knocking the condos and the townhomes people, like, that's powerful, right? They have a particular set of um, constraints about their roof. Like, there's a kind of slightly unconventional sale, but you're like, hey, I'm an expert at putting solar
Yeah,
on condos in San Diego, and that gives them a lot of I mean, that'll give them a lot of peace of mind, right, and confidence about it going with you. So I think that's
yeah,
powerful.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And another thing you show, but I don't know if you guys do the target. Is there a filter to target like condos, townhomes for Solar Scout? I
There
know there's
isn't
one for
currently.
like mobile
There's,
homes, right?
yeah, there's one for manufactured homes, and that was like a niche that people love in Texas. They're like, because these people, oftentimes the people who live in manufactured homes, they have high electricity bills because the insulation is thin,
Yeah.
and so the home isn't very efficient. And then they have these big rectangular roofs that can fit a lot of panels. And provided that your financing partner doesn't have an issue with these manufactured homes on fixed foundations, people are selling large systems to them successfully. And so that's kind of
Yeah.
one layer that we built just because people were like, I love selling to these manufactured home communities.
Yeah. Yeah. I was experiencing it's gotten a little more complicated with that here in California. Getting
Mm,
them approved and finding lenders and financiers and stuff to work with them. But yeah,
mm,
it's a good one. And another thing I like a lot too is just um because some people see it and Solarscout at first glance could be similar to like some of these other door knocking apps that are out there. But I've compared the data because just with my company, we already have access to like a regular door knocking app that has the basic data, like phone numbers here and there, the names, who's on the title. And so what I do, I'll actually compare it with the data we have in our other app. And Solar Scout, it's just crazy the level of accuracy that there is compared to any other app I've seen out there, or any other like door knocking tool. Just because, like,
mm,
yeah, you see which ones are renting now. So even if you weren't going to use any of that other data, it's just like saves you so much time seeing, okay, this is a renter. This is like the correct name on the title. Because just so many times, I'll be out there knocking with like newer reps with their company, and they'll be going to like knock the door, and I'll just be checking. I'll be like, nope, skip that home, renter. Oh, skip it. So
mm.
yeah, it's just that stuff alone is super valuable. Knowing the renters and just using it like that too. Um,
That's great.
but
That's
yeah,
great to hear. Yeah, I mean, I can hint at some of the stuff that is coming out soon. Actually, one is actually I want to see if you know. So, what's the number one reason that people go solar? Do you know? It's such an easy question, but it's so easy that it
um,
might be hard to think of.
well, I think the reason they think they're going to solar is save money. But
Exactly.
is
Yeah,
that a
yeah,
trick
precisely.
question? Okay,
It's not a
okay,
trick question.
it's
No,
like
no. Number one.
okay,
So we were looking because we look at studies of this, right? So number one is of course they'll go solar if it saves them money. But
yeah,
the number two reason is it's not like, oh, my friends went solar or I love the environment. Number two reason is actually for like resilience against power outages and like storms. And so,
mm,
the next thing we're doing is pulling power outage info, like, hey, because you can often pinpoint which homes are losing power, which areas have
oh,
lost
that's
power.
good.
And then,
Yeah,
you can go there and say, hey, that was a bad power outage last week, right? Like, okay, yeah, well, solar is, one of the top reasons people go solar is to prevent that, right? Even,
yeah,
even if nothing else happens, to prevent that, those power outages is worth a lot. So that's kind of the next
yeah,
one
that's
of the
so
next
good.
things we're working on.
Yeah. Is that right? Some of this, because I know some markets, it's a little bit easier to pull data than others on certain things. Like you were telling me, for example, I think you said that the data in Texas with what they're using is a lot more accurate than a place like California. So do you find a lot of like variance in that where like you have more specific data in one market or one state versus another state, or is it all
Yeah,
somewhat
totally. So
similar?
I mean, that's right. The data that different utilities and like grid operators make public is different in different markets. And so, sometimes you'll have a lot of really detailed data that's made public, and then we can run our machine learning algorithm on it, and then get really accurate inferences. Sometimes the data is a little bit less granular, so the it's more of like a ballpark estimate. But
Yeah.
then, the data we like the most are stuff that you can be totally exact about, like this person definitely responded to a solar ad or definitely moved in or definitely tried to go solar. Most of the data we do is not a guess. It's like the literal data, kind of data from the source itself. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's fire. Yeah, and so another thing. So how many? Because I know you're all over the country, but do you guys put a cap on like how many people per market? Because I know some people they might be listening to this and be like, okay, well, I want to use it in say San Diego, for example, or I want to use it here. But what if there's already like 10 other companies using it? So what's your
Mm.
solution for that? Do you guys put on? Do you guys let people know, hey, we've already got this many users in this market? Or is it just kind of free for all? Do you guys do anything about that?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and we get it all the time. I think people in solar are very competitive and very aware of the competition, which is good. And that's been obviously getting a leg up over the competition is part of what people come to us for. One thing I will say is I've never heard a team getting on board in a market and being like, oh, these expired permits or these move-ins, they've all been hit up by other Solarscout users already. I think like it's just not like saturated enough, and these markets are so big that it's never been an issue. The
Yeah.
other way to think about it is like if you're in San Diego and you want to sell to new move-ins or you want to sell to people who've tried to go solar, there's no like other data source. This is like the data source, and so in some sense, it doesn't matter how many people are looking at it. Like it's still going to be an advantage. But
Yeah.
the truth at the end of the day is um, most people do quite well with it. But there are people who like don't necessarily apply themselves, and like it's not like everybody is going crazy on the data all the time. It's like the best teams are going crazy on it, but you won't find this like saturation effect, at least not at this point.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, like San Diego where I'm at, it's just, you could spend, I feel like it'd take me like 10 years to get to, all the people I want to see with this. There's
Yeah,
like
totally.
so many different data points, and especially if people are like targeting different things, because, you probably get some users that they're going to target maybe the permits, some users, maybe they're going to target the new move-ins. So between that, yeah, I imagine it'd be pretty tough to like, overwhelm a market or have a lot of people using it. So
Yeah, a lot of it
yeah, it's good.
refreshes too, right? Like if your strategy is I'm going to knock the neighbors of people who are going solar recently, like that can be your whole strategy. Well, obviously every month that data is changing, and then same with new movements. Every month, new permits are expiring, new people are moving in, so a lot of it refreshes. That's another way to
Yeah,
think about it.
yeah, it's good. Cool. Well, as we start wrapping up here, Shadi, like I know, um, I think in the beginning, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's mostly just you had team accounts. I think now you guys have some options for just like individual reps that want to use Solar Scout. And so for those that are running teams that maybe we're trying to get their whole team onboarded on this, what have you seen that's most effective to like get whole teams using it? Because we just had a call the other week, and I think you asked me, hey, how much success have you seen with your team? And I told you, well, a lot of our team hasn't even used it, and a lot of people haven't logged on, and a lot of that is my fault because I haven't like, had some login issues and haven't trained them a ton. So I guess this is kind of a question for me, and you already shared a few things with me. But if someone wants to sign their team up, what would you say is like, how do you get people to actually use it? And I don't know, get them to have success with it if you're trying to roll it out for a whole team.
Yeah, that's a great question. I hear this sometimes from managers, which is like, oh, if I buy piece of software for my guys, like getting them to use it is a whole nother animal. Um,
Yeah,
and I think it just comes down to management, right? Like why, like if this thing is going to make your guys twice as much money, um, they naturally should use it. However, you probably have to organize them and get them to sit down in a meeting. They can join our trainings right on Wednesdays and Fridays, and then hear from our other users on like people who are systematically doing these strategies. How much more are they producing? There's just some level where it needs to be introduced to them kind of formally, so they get a sense of like, oh, this is what this thing is. Um,
yeah,
it's not some alternate door knocking tool, but like it'll literally show me who to knock, and I can generate twice as many appointments. Um, so given that they have that introduction and that training, like they join one of our training calls and ask questions, pretty
yeah,
much, and then you can't pry it out of their hands after that. If they never get onboarded though, and
yeah,
you're like, oh, I heard about this thing. There's this login. Um, if they don't know what it is, they probably won't log in.
yeah, yeah. And I think especially where guys are getting it, because I think anyone paying for a tool is going to use it. At least that's how I am. If I'm like
Mm, mm.
putting money into
Yes,
it, I'm way
that's
more
right.
likely to use it.
That's right. That's right.
but
Yes, they have
yeah,
to pay
that's
as
what,
well. Having them pay helps so much. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that's what I'm thinking. It's like if you're giving it to your guys, have some sort of like, because it's the same thing. I'm sure you've heard of people like giving their team leads and they don't knock
Yeah.
doors and they're like, oh, these leads suck. I'm not having success. And it's just like they get lazy. So I think a similar thing can happen with tools like this. If guys are just getting it and there's no money on the line for them, it's just like, hey, go out and use it. Yeah, some guys take advantage of it and I don't know, maybe they don't use it or are lazy with it. So I think it's figuring out either have them put money on the line or just if they're not actually using it consistently, take away their logins, stuff like that. Cause yeah, I think anything I've seen, especially running teams, guys need to have like their money where their mouth is and some
Yeah,
sort of like, um,
totally.
I
You're
guess like,
totally right
you know,
about that.
punishment for not using it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I see people who pay, I mean, anyone who actually sits down and looks at it, they're like, oh yeah, I would 100% pay for this. And they do, right? Oftentimes, sometimes teams
yeah,
will charge their people with an adder to use it. And then we have whole teams that are happily
it's a
paying
good
like
idea.
a 15-cent adder on their deals, like 7 to 15 cent adder on their deals, split between the closer and
Mm,
the setter, just to use Solarscout, and and they're happy with it. They're like, yeah, this produces a lot and is worth it. But it also changes
it's good.
the psychology. It's like, oh yeah, this is part of an investment, and I need to make the most of it.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah.
there's that
So good.
aspect of it.
Yeah. That's so good. It's good. Cool. Well, I hope whoever's listening to this, whether you're using Solar Scout or not, I think the main thing for me, Shadi, it's just been like, you know, create a system around knocking doors and don't just go out sporadically. Because I think so many guys, they just get maybe burned out or like, it's just like the same thing over and over and over. But for me, Solar Scout, it just kind of kept it more fresh because my like, okay, I can go target these people and maybe I switch too fast. But for me, sometimes like, okay, I'm getting bored with this strategy, and I'm going to go try out this strategy, and just kind of makes it more exciting for me that I know that I can have all these different layers and just kind of geek out on out there and have access to. So hopefully, whoever's listening to this, if you haven't done a demo with these guys, I would definitely recommend going and doing a demo because even if you don't end up using Solar Scout, I think it'll just like open your mind to possibilities. And like we were talking about before, you can to a certain degree you can go find a lot of this data. It's definitely going to be more of a long process and a pain in the butt to get all these things together. That's the beauty of Solar Scout is you have it all simple, saves you tons of time. Just get it all in one place. But guys can definitely go out and get a lot of this data and dig through stuff to get it themselves. But yeah, last question or two, Shadi. Like solar, it's a pretty niche industry, and I know we said riches are in the niches, but um, like, I wonder, do you guys have plans to roll this out to other like door to door industries, like pest
Mm,
alarms, or yeah, what's like the future for Solar Scout? What's your
yeah,
future plans?
that's a great question. We're actually already expanding to roofing. And it's a recent development, but it turns out with roofing, it's kind of even more of a slam dunk. So, for one example of what we do in roofing is we pull all the roofing permit data of, like, let's say Davis, California, all the way back to 1990. And so from there, you can see who had their last roof replacement like 30 years ago. And you know that roofs only last 30 years. So you can drag the slider down, hone in on all the super old roofs that need replacement. And like, it's not a question of if, but when. Like these people have to replace their roofs. So you can
Mm,
laser in on those. So it's kind of extending the permit data idea to other industries. So roofing is one, HVAC is another, right? Seeing super old HVAC systems and replacing those. But also what's interesting is that there's crossover. Like if you want to talk about niches, right? You can use roofing permit data, like to figure out who's recently replaced their roofs. And then if you're selling solar, you can go to them and say, well, you just got your roof replaced. That means for the past 5 years, you weren't a solar candidate because your roof was too old. And now you're a solar candidate. So, that's like a really good niche that actually has just opened up because we started expanding to
wow,
roofing. So,
wow,
yeah, I think we're doing roofing and HVAC next.
yeah, wow, yeah. I think I did see that you guys posted about that the roof part. Yeah, that's
Yeah, yeah.
that's genius. That's really good. Yeah, that's cool. What about do you guys have? Um, well, I guess maybe that'd be new move-ins, but it's just going off in my head like old people that because a common objection that I'm getting with a lot of these old people is like, oh,
Mm,
I don't want to go solar because I'm gonna be dead in the next 5 years, and it's kind of a grim objection that we
it is
get a
grim,
lot
yeah.
with older people.
Well,
So I don't
well,
know. Do you think that would just fall in like the people new move-ins, or like is it possible to see people that have just passed away or something? The home
oh
is
wow, I've never even thought about that. I don't know what the
yeah,
good thing about if people recently passed away. I mean, you can definitely see super old people because
yeah,
their ages come through. But in terms of other niches, like other niches that we're like brainstorming about, like there are some that we already just show, but we haven't talked about yet, which are like electric vehicle owners. right? We show
Yeah.
those. The stats show that they're 4 times more likely to actually buy solar because they can charge their car with the solar panel. So it
Mm,
makes a lot more sense.
yeah.
Um, are there other niches?
What what about like pools? People with
Oh
pools
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
don't
yeah.
have solar. Is there a way
Yeah,
to
we actually
target
have
that?
that. I forgot. Yeah, we do have that. We use pool permit data, right? When people
Okay.
like dig pools in their backyards and stick pools in, right? They pull permits to do that, so we can figure out who those people are, and we do
Yeah.
show those to you. So you'll see, hey, this guy just got a pool like last year. Um, their energy
Yeah.
bill is spiking because they have a pool. I think another interesting one, and this is kind of niche, but we haven't even done it yet. But it's people
Mm,
who are installing ADUs, right? Like
mm,
additional dwelling units. You're
yeah.
actually required in California to get solar if you get an
Right.
ADU, and then that comes through the permit history. So these are all like
Mm,
all niche ways to get solar, to find solar leads, and it totally works, right? Mm, people succeed with this all the time.
yeah, that's fire. What can you target people that maybe they're not like getting a new pool, but they've had a pool and they just don't have solar yet? Is there a filter to just target those people that have pools but no solar?
You can actually filter it down, like look at people who've had pools for 3 years, and then use the aerial imagery to find those people who just don't have solar yet. I think
Okay.
that's one way to do
Okay.
it.
So you have to. Okay. So you'd have to kind of do it roundabout. Yeah, it's good though.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Good stuff. Cool. Well, I know we'd be here all day, Shadi, but possibilities are endless. So we'll be respectful of your time. And if people want to hear more, definitely go book a demo. So they've probably heard some of our little call to actions here in the podcast. But in case they haven't, what's the best way to book a demo and connect more with you guys, Shadi?
Yeah, for sure. So go to solarscout.app and then click book a demo, and then you'll meet with someone on our sales team, or sometimes you meet with me. But whether you end up buying or not, once you've booked a demo through us, like you start to get invited to our trainings, and there we tell you about like all the cutting edge stuff we're building. We interact with you directly. We can talk about all kinds of different approaches, and then we also provide scripts of like, hey, once you're in front of this homeowner who's a new move-in, what do you say to them? And then you could just be part of the community that way as well.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so love it, and I think that's a great idea doing that because even if you're not gonna use Solar Scout or maybe it's out of the budget or whatever right now, like how valuable is it to have those scripts and you could start just experimenting yourself, right? You could get some of those new move-in scripts, go start targeting, just new move-ins yourself. So love that. So, Shadi, thanks again for coming on the podcast. We can't wait to see what's next. Yeah, it's I feel like every other week it's like Christmas morning or something, waiting to see what new features rolled out. It's like you guys
Oh,
are,
thanks for saying that. That's nice. Yeah.
yeah, you guys are rolling out so many features. It's really cool to, yeah, it makes it really exciting to follow these guys on Facebook and everything. So go shoot them a follow, and anyone listening, go shoot Shadi a comment or a DM. Let him know you appreciated him coming on the show. And last question, Shadi, if people, I guess speaking outside of Solar Scout for a minute, maybe what are some things you've seen on like a mindset level, or you're obviously a successful
Mm.
entrepreneur yourself, what are some just I guess general things that you've seen maybe separate like top level sales reps, top level entrepreneurs from guys that are struggling and not having as much success? Just to wrap up the podcast here, what would you say?
Oh, that's great. Well, I wonder what is there new to say on this topic. I mean, I can definitely repeat some things that work for me and that I know work for a lot of people. The first one is focus, right? So we have like at Solar Scout, right, or just in my life, I've had the opportunity to like, you can do a bunch of different stuff with the data, like sell the data directly, do this, do that. We're like, no, we're just going to build this one thing in this software for door-to-door people and virtual door knocking people. So focusing on that has helped this thing succeed, right? So in general, focus is huge. I meet a number of people in solar who are like doing a bunch of things at once. They're like, yeah, I do real estate, and I also do this, and solar is my part-time thing. And immediately, that's kind of a red flag to me. It's like, um, the people who do the best with Solar Scout, or just the best in general, they're like focused on solar 100%. So I think focus,
Yeah,
if I have to pick one thing, that's the number one thing.
yeah, love it, love it. Yeah, focus so important, and yeah, I think you've probably seen it. So many guys in solar have ADD. They're on to the next thing. They're on to
Mm.
real estate. They're trying to Yeah, matter of fact, talked to one of our reps just last week. She was like, "Oh, I found this new way we can save people on their gas bill too." And
Yeah,
then
yeah. That's like a
she
red
spent
flag.
like yeah, she spent like 3 weeks trying to do that and ended up like not working out. Didn't make a dime doing it. I'm like, you just gotta put your head down. Just solar works, so why not just go all in that? So yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
so important and a thing that a lot of people struggle with, and distractions come up. So thanks for bringing that up. So, Shadi, thanks again for coming on the show. I'm sure we'll have you on in the future, talk about more features. But in the meantime, guys, go give them a follow. And thanks again for your support of the show, Shadi, and let us know how we can continue to support you. But appreciate you.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. Thanks so much, Taylor. And thanks for doing what you do, encouraging everybody in solar. I think it's a really wonderful thing you're doing. So keep it up. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, brother. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks.